Alright, so here we are. It's Glaser Book AP GoPo class notes for the last 2 days, Wednesday the 19th of September and 20th of September. The big note for the last 2 weeks will be the framers of the Constitution have studied the political philosophers like Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu. They have learned human history and they believe human nature is self-interested. People that have power will use their power in their own self-interest to get more power. Another way of saying this is people with power never voluntarily give up their power. You see the asterisk on this slide says President Washington is the exception. It's really few and far between who give up power voluntarily. You lose an election, you get assassinated, there's a scandal, but rarely is there a voluntary giving up of power. There are historical documents that in chronological order have greatly influenced the founding of this great republic 231 years ago. There they are, from the Magna Carta in 1215 to the Common Sense written by Thomas Paine, the Declaration of Independence by Jefferson, the Articles of Confederation, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. You see on this slide it's simply the Magna Carta. Picture of it just to give you a visual ID. Some general information. King John of England was forced by the barons, the nobles, the landed class to give up some power, specifically jury trial, to those when they're accused of crimes, so there's not an arbitrary taking of a noble person or a baron's life, liberty, or property without cause. The connection to our Bill of Rights is our government cannot take a citizen's life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. Those are the rights we find where you get a lawyer, there's a fair and speedy trial, you should have a trial, jury trial of your peers, no cruel and unusual punishment, they can't take your property, the Fifth Amendment says, without using eminent domain, which is the takings clause that says they have to pay you fair market value. They have to use your property for a public good if they're going to take it. So again, they can't take it arbitrarily. They can't take your property, your liberty, and lock you in a cage. They can't take your life, the death penalty, without due process, the due process of law. And that really does go back as far as the Magna Carta. Some words: no freeman shall be taken. From the Magna Carta, it's a quote just to give you an idea of the words that were in the Magna Carta. And we talked about the landed class, the nobles, the barons, ceding power from King John or threatening to overthrow him, to revolt, probably to end him and his rule. FDR's inaugural quote from 1941 calls our attention back to the Magna Carta, saying people have wanted democratic rule. They've wanted self-rule, the ability to have more determination in how they are ruled. The democratic aspiration is no mere recent phase in human history. It was written in Magna Carta. When I listened to a podcast last night, unlike my oddcast tonight, one professor talks about the Declaration of Independence was a political propaganda piece, literally presenting ideas, facts, or allegations spread deliberately to further one's cause. In this case, declaring and justifying independence from England, King George III, and also to damage their cause. So that's what propaganda is. We should know what that is early on in a basic poli-sci class. Jefferson also said in the podcast that I listened to last night with this professor acting as Jefferson that Thomas Paine's Common Sense was a huge influence on the Declaration, because Thomas Paine said It is common sense that the people within the colony should be able to have self-rule and not be ruled by a centralized government across the Atlantic Ocean in England. A unitary, centralized government. It's just common sense that there should be a government here in those 13 original colonies, which became the 13 original states, with self-rule, self-determination. Paine uses the word republicanism, really saying what we have today, how we got a republic. The root of republicanism is republic. Here's the next slide where it says what Republican is. It's not the Republican Party. That would be capital R and small of the rest of the letters. But republics have supreme power residing in the citizens. That power is exercised by voting in elections and choosing our representatives who make political decisions and policy decisions. But they're responsible to us. The thing I talked about the most today in class was certainly that Jefferson is elite as far as his education goes. He's got great tutors as he's growing up. He gets to go to some of the one of the few schools that was a college in the early days, like William and Mary. The fact that he served in the Virginia House of Burgesses I find to be absolutely amazing, because we talked 2 weeks ago, about how the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1619 was the first democratically elected body in the colonies, and the royal governor of Virginia and the king were fine with democratic elected legislators making decisions about local issues, not all of Virginia issues. That's the royal governor's purview. Certainly not all the colonies, because that's the king's purview. But local issues. The seeds of the revolution, I believe, are planted here in the first democratic policy experiment in the colonies, called the Virginia House of Burgesses. On this next slide, I don't see a lot for us to get too in-depth about. Obviously, this is the slide, what the Declaration was. We wanted to list the reasons why we're declaring war against the greatest military the world's ever seen. There's 27 different claims. He has blah, blah, blah. He has violated our natural rights. 27 individual grievances listed in the Declaration of Independence. It's a cry to the rest of the world. Let's work together to take the bully on the world stage down. Let's take Great Britain. Let's take England down, who's got the greatest land military we've seen and greatest navy the world had ever seen. Send us the weapons of war, send us money, send us soldiers, all of the above. Jefferson is also famous for his writings about a wall of separation between church and state. Let the church do what churches do without the state telling it what to do, but also let the government of the state do what it's supposed to do with public policy without religious influence. Clearly, we see John Locke's ideas all over the Declaration of Independence, with Jefferson writing that the colonies have the right to overthrow a tyrannical government. Tyrannical, the root is tyrant, one who becomes abusive of his citizens. Some more main points of the Declaration. Certainly things that we should talk about. All men are created equal. Unalienable or inalienable means they're God-given rights, and if you're not a believer, they're given to you by birth. They can't be taken away. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. In my words, it's life, liberty, and property that can't be taken away without the due process of law. It's natural rights, baby. Consent. A legitimate government has the consent of the governed, and that's what you see in the top bullet point on this slide. Again, Locke, and the idea that when government abuses its power, the people have the right to overthrow it. And they tried to compromise with the king multiple times, to no avail. Again, a slide. They finally had to declare their independence. It was the first step in creating a new nation. We know that after the successful victory in the American Revolution, they decided to go to the farthest extreme away from what King George III represented. King George III's government was a unitary government with centralized power, distant land across the ocean in England. It's unitary centralized power. So they went with a confederal form of government, the farthest from centralized power, because a confederal government has decentralized power. Intentionally weak central government. The powers resided in the regional governments. We call them the states. The basics of the Articles of Confederation. Confederal government, decentralized particular power. One more time, intentionally weak central government. The states possessed of the power because they feared too much power in a centralized government like King George III. That's it. Thank you.